Beyond the Mic with Sean Dillon.
We're joined on the Starline by a New York Times bestselling author, creator of the Gray Man series of books. You've seen his work on Netflix. His latest thriller is the book Sentinel. We welcome Mark Greaney.
Hey there, how are you?
Absolutely great, Mark. Let's go beyond the mic. Josh Duffy doesn't look for trouble. It just seems to find him. What makes him such a great character to write?
Well, he's a fun character to write because he has a lot of vulnerabilities. This is the second book in the series. You don't have to read them in order. But in the first book, he's a civilian military contractor, so he's in constant peril the whole time. And I wanted to start this book off very different. He's a family man. It's 3 years later. He has what he thinks is a very stable job with the U.S. government. But he and his wife and his kids are sent to the embassy in Ghana, Africa. And they find themselves in the middle of a really violent coup that's sort of put out by foreign influencers. So even though he's trying to get away from the violence of his past, he's very much caught up in it. He's a good character in that he has some really interesting vulnerabilities that make him fun to write.
You do such extensive research before you write any book. Stunt driving, firearms training, and your stories are integrated into today's events. As the world is changing faster and faster, have you ever created a situation that you thought, might be too impossible for today, that almost came true?
Yeah, that has happened. And the third book I wrote with Tom Clancy was called Command Authority, and it involved Russia invading Ukraine. And it came out 3 months before Russia invaded Ukraine and took Crimea, which happens in the book. And I just wrote a book about AI, and you write them a year in advance. And you kind of have to posit where the world's going to be in a year. And so many news stories were coming out that were so similar to things that I worked on. But, that's what you get from doing a lot of research and, reading a lot of boring government think tank publications and things like that and turning it into fun fiction.
Mark, what makes a great story?
I always say in my line of work, which is the thriller genre, the more that you understand your villain's plan or what your villain's wants, the better your story is going to end up being. I mean, obviously you have to have a compelling hero, but there's something about really getting into the mind of your villain and the high stakes of what they want that I think really, I always, anytime I'm confused with my story, I just go back to thinking about the bad guys and what are they trying to get out of all this? And the story usually develops from that.
Mark Greaney's latest thriller is Sentinel, and he joins us beyond the mic for the Rocky and 8. All this is Mark, his 8 random questions. Answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. There is absolutely no pressure. What's your favorite non-Tom Clancy book you've ever read?
The Devil's Alternative by Frederick Forsyth.
Best thing about your 3 stepchildren?
Just, they give me as much love as I give them. I mean, not to be corny, but it's true.
Which country that you've written about and visited would you never, ever live in?
Russia.
So what's the best food you've had in Ghana?
Jollof rice.
Really?
Yeah, so good.
What do you do to cool off on a hot day?
Sleep. Lay in a dark room.
I could sleep right now. What's one thing your wife will always challenge you about?
Me reading my reviews.
Why?
Oh, gosh, because I kind of get fired up, and she's always like telling me not to read them and not to reply.
Makes sense. What's the one thing your dad, Ed, taught you that you will pass on to your kids?
Oh, my gosh, just curiosity about all aspects of the world and humans.
You met your wife, Allison, at dinner at Cafe 1912. Do you remember what you had for dinner?
No, if I did, I'd be in trouble. Probably steak, but I don't know for sure.
Good answer. It's time for the back half with Mark Greaney. Beyond the mic, his latest book is Sentinel. My dad and I had the same tradition as you and your dad, exchanging Tom Clancy books. How did working with Clancy change the way you see yourself?
Oh, gosh. My stories, I'd written 3 books before Clancy, and they were sort of like Die Hard or John Wick, very action-oriented without a lot of other stuff. And then after I started working with Clancy, I had the freedom to write more geopolitical novels, deeper and wider, and that's just something I learned from him, from his writing and from being around him.
How has writing helped you become a better man?
Oh my gosh. I say that 95% of everyone I've ever met in my life, I've met in the last 10 years. I used to have a lot of social anxiety and now I don't at all. So I just think it's just expanded my horizons in every possible way.
Mark, what do you want people to take away from the Sentinel series?
I always want people to have fun and enjoy a story. I put a lot of real issues in there and a lot of real politics and a lot of real, problems. And I just want everyone just to, have fun with it, but also maybe learn a little bit.
As you were publicizing Sentinel, you have the latest Gray Man novel coming out in February, Midnight Black. Your first book took 15 years to write, and you fell into every writer's trap possible. How did making those mistakes for the first book made writing today so much easier?
Oh, that's a great, great question. I really feel like I did so much wrong so early, and I was able to recognize that, which I think is the tough thing. I just kind of fight against that, and I tell myself that, once I finished that first book, I realized it's really not that hard. I spent most of the time whining about it not being finished, and when I could have just been working. And so I can write a book in 6, 7 months now, and that's just because I've learned from doing it the wrong way.
So admit it, Mark, how many books do you have going on right now in your head?
Well, I'm writing Midnight Black, which is the 14th Gray Man book, and I'm looking ahead to a standalone I want to do, possibly another book in this Sentinel, the Armored series. So really, I'm only working on one. There's another, so there's like three that are coming up once I'm done with this. So pretty soon I'll be into something else.
When you saw the Netflix version of The Gray Man, what was your initial thoughts?
I mean, it was the best commercial anyone could have for their writing, and I looked at it that way. I enjoyed it. I thought Ryan Gosling was perfect as the Gray Man. There were parts of the story that I liked, parts of the story I didn't really, get because I wrote something different. But at the end of the day, I was happy with it.
Mark, how was transforming yourself from when you weren't social to the pandemic when none of us were social to finding your wife and now having an instant family? How'd that change you?
Oh, I'm a typical dad now, which is so weird because I was like 52 and with no kids, and now we're about to orchestrate a trip to Hawaii, and I'm going to be like the typical anal dad on a trip, making sure everybody walks in a straight line so we don't get lost. So it's funny. I look at my life now and go like, wow, I didn't see this coming.
His book is Sentinel, and author Mark Greaney joins us beyond the mic for one big question. How do you see the world differently after meeting the men and undergoing the training you've experienced in writing all these books?
Yeah, I do see the world differently. I have more confidence in the world and in America because of our military and because of people at the State Department and because of people at the Pentagon. And I think we have amazing patriots that are keeping this country afloat, and we have so many problems politically and domestically, and it's almost too much to take sometimes. But I kind of go back to the fact that this country's been dealing with these problems since the 1700s, and I feel pretty confident in America.
Now it's time for a question from my dad. He asked, Mark, have you ever written something and then thought, Clancy would kill me if I wrote it that way?
Yes, absolutely. I did back in the day when I was writing his book.
His stepkids give him as much love as they can, sleeps when it gets too hot, and he wants you to read his book, Sentinel. We thank Mark Greaney for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you so much.
And that, my friends, is Beyond the Mic Shortcut. If you're enjoying these conversations, please check out another Beyond the Mic episode to find more actors, artists, and people you need to know. We'd also appreciate a like and subscribe on the Good Pods app.